Alrighty. The Committee on Oversight on Subcommittee on Homeland Security and Foreign Influence will come to order. Clerk, will you please take the attendance?
Chair Bruck.
Present.
Representatives Meerman. Here. Schreiber. Menser.
Here.
Conlon.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Alrighty. Representative Meerman would like to move to adopt the minutes from the May 7th meeting. Hearing no objection, they will be approved. All right, well, welcome to a new week. We had a good meeting last week. I believe we also had, I know it was not part of the committee, but we had our symposium last week, the drone symposium, 3.5 hours. I know there's various members here on the committee that were either there or had the representatives there as well. Went very well. We had our presenter last week, Dakota Greenwood, was there. He didn't speak during the symposium, but we have another individual that attended the symposium last week that is presenting today. Mr. Fuller. Hey. He's a good man, good man. But we have Matt Rybar is going to be presenting today. He represents or is president of the Michigan Public Safety Drone Association. So he's going to be presenting here shortly. And for guests, we welcome your attendance. And just for the record, there's a lot of people that actually watch this committee afterwards, which amazes me. Not so much on the floor, but I hear every time we have committee, I have people just so, Representative Colin and Menser and others know that people are watching us, and it's pretty humbling too. I enjoy it. Well, it's good to be here. Next week, as I did state, I did send you each an email. We'll do share items starting next week, but I would like to get an email that you're going to do and what it would be. So, yes. Yeah, exactly. So without any further ado, I welcome Mr. Rybar. You can go to not the stand there, go to the chair and just hit the red button so it lights up, and then you can begin. Please introduce yourself, give a little background on yourself before you do your presentation as well. If take a few minutes to do that as well. If you did, I'm sure you probably.
Awesome. Well, Chairman Bruck and the committee, thank you so much for having me today. This is a topic I know you all are very passionate about, and we at the Michigan Public Safety Drone Association are as well. So excited for the conversation and to share some of the information with you about how public safety drone operations are currently being conducted across the state of Michigan. So as the chairman said, my name is Matt Rybar. I currently serve as the president of the Michigan Public Safety Drone Association. I have a background in electrical engineering. I spent some time in the engineering world post-college, working in the conveyor industry as a controls engineer. I also have 11 years of background in law enforcement, working for a variety of agencies. My full-time career was spent in Kent County, Michigan, with the sheriff's office there as a road patrol deputy. I started their drone program back in 2000. We good? Oh, okay. Thought we might have technical issues. Started their program back in 2017 and was with that program when I was working on the road as a deputy there. I currently serve as the vice president of remote operations for a company called Unmanned Vehicle Technologies, where we get to work with agencies every day in deploying this technology as well. So I have it both on the business commercial side of the house as well as I'm still active in public safety. Lastly, I currently also work for the Metro Parks as their emergency manager and a patrol officer alongside their drone team. So trying to provide that holistic approach to both the commercial side, but then how we're actually using the technology in the public safety industry as a whole. The Michigan Public Safety Drone Association was founded back in 2022. A few of us in the industry realized that there was a big gap currently in the state of Michigan for localized training, localized advocacy. Sure, there are great conferences across the nation that you can send people to. However, there wasn't a lot of resources here in the state where you could truly train, say, a whole team of drone operators. You could send one operator across to a conference, but you wouldn't typically, as an agency, send a whole group of people. And so we've brought this community together to foster that type of regional training and collaboration across the state of Michigan. Currently, we have 8 regions that service the state. We've broken it up following the Michigan State Homeland Security regions due to some of the resources that they have that have assisted with some of our events and other things to that capacity. But we also have a board that spans each of those regions. So we want to make sure that we have great representation across the entire state from each of those regions. Not many drone conferences happen up in the UP, and we've helped change that because there is a ton of drone operations that happen up there in the UP, and a lot we can all learn from on the public-private partnership side too, with both industry like the electrical sector, utility sector, also working closely with law enforcement and public safety drone operators, because when resources are limited, you can very much pool resources in a place like the UP. So we have quite a few events that happen up there each year to support those operations. In 2025, just a few numbers of what our association currently looks like. We hosted an annual conference back in January. We had 175 public safety officers and first responders show up to that event, spanning 55 different organizations. Currently, we sit at about 500 members with 120 organizations, police, fire, emergency management, involved with the association. Last year we had 3 regional events. We've upped that to 10 regional events now, really driving home that we're hosting these events in each of the regions to provide that training and resources. One of the biggest misnomers I think right now on the training side in our industry is that all a pilot has to do to be certified by the FAA is to go take a written test. There is no such thing as a flight proficiency course or anything else that they have to demonstrate those skills. And so just like a canine officer has to get accredited every year to do a drug sniff or to be able to testify in court to those different types of things, we're working on a flight proficiency accreditation within the association that members can come to us to get that accreditation for a liability reduction, for the agencies to be able to prove that their members are able to conduct these types of operations. We actually next month will be rolling that out formally, so we're excited for what that looks like. Currently, there are about 200 agencies in the state of Michigan flying drone operations. There's not quite 200 on this list, just shy of that, but there's about 200 flying drone operations in Michigan today. If we look at each of your areas, Representative Shriver, Oakland County Sheriff's Office, Oakland Township Fire Department are 2 examples. Representative Merriman, the Muskegon County Sheriff's Office as well as Ottawa County Sheriff's Office both have robust programs. Chairman Bruck, Monroe County Sheriff's Office, as well as Monroe Department of Public Safety. Representative Mentzer, Macomb County Sheriff's Office has a robust program. And Representative Conlin, the Livingston County Sheriff's Office, and then Hamburg Department of Public Safety. Now, I could have listed a lot more in each of your areas. Those are just a few of the highlights that are currently conducting those operations in your areas. So what does drone use look like today? We're going to first start there, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what that technology looks like in the future. So first responder drone use today is for a number of different purposes, whether that be search and rescue, subject tracking, scene assessment, tactical applications, disaster response. So we'll start with search and rescue. An example of a recent search and rescue was Mason County, just a couple weeks ago, located a 73-year-old female who was lost in the woods for a couple days. Once they started to deploy the resources, they found her within a number of hours, and the sheriff came out and said that without that drone technology, they don't believe they would have found her in any reasonable amount of time. Tactical applications is a great example where we're introducing robots into situations before we're sending people or first responders. It can also help de-escalate situations by ingesting that technology in first to slow things down on different scenes. But an example of tactical applications is back in April, the Roseville Police Department deployed a drone inside a tactical situation, and the suspect walked out and surrendered when they saw that drone. They thought, this is up, it's over. Who cares about the 25 SWAT guys sitting outside? It was just the little drone that had that guy surrender at that point. And lastly, the disaster response. One example that hits home with us right now are all of the ice storms that we just had in northern Michigan. Obviously, $75 million of response aid has now funneled that direction from the feds to the state. But we had 10-plus agencies up there helping on the ground floor with those ice storm disaster response operations. One of the biggest hurdles they faced were the public safety communication system, which is all of our 800 megahertz radios. They use the drones to inspect all of those towers, to get the parts and resources, to get all those towers back up and running. because when cell service went down, 800 megahertz radios was about all we had to rely on for day-to-day communications up there during that response. Cross-agency collaboration is another big motivation of our work with the association, is bringing together resources in areas that may not have them for a particular incident. Hamburg Township Department of Public Safety is a great example where they have only a couple patrol officers on every shift, and so when they get that big critical incident, they need to have and know who else in their region can come maybe supply drone technology or other types of technology to those situations. The photo on the upper left is actually 8 agencies working together to support the CRIM last year in the city of Flint, providing aerial overwatch and crowd safety, scene safety during that operation. And so another big mission of the group is to how do we link up agencies to other agencies in the surrounding areas to make sure that they have the resources for those events. The bottom 3 pictures are supporting several of the VIP dignitary visits during the presidential election this year. There was a lot of agencies that were finally tapped to deploy drone technology alongside those campaign events. After the assassination attempt in July, the Secret Service changed their tune about allowing state and local government to help with drone technology, help with counter-drone technology. And so all of the events in our battleground state this fall had state and local government deploying drones to assist with those scene security situations. Drone detection, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is a lacking technology in our state right now. And the state police was able to help with some of that technology. But quite frankly, we don't have the resources we need yet here in the state to be able to truly secure these types of massive situations, mass events from the threat of drones from the nefarious side of the house. So right now, patrol officer, fireman shows up on scene, unfolds the drone, typically flies it from a controller on the scene. But what we're looking and tracking now is what does that look like in the future? And in urban areas, something called drones as a first responder is starting to become a reliable technology, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But as we provide more data to a patrol officer, I have a little bit of bias to law enforcement, but also firemen. If we provide more data in the car as they're responding, it's harder for them to effectively respond in a safe manner. And so many agencies have started something called a real-time crime center, which brings all of that data into one location with a detective that's sitting there static to be able to analyze the drone footage, analyze the license plate readers, bring all that kind of real-time data, and then re-provide that back out to those units that are responding. And so one place that we see the drone programs growing is in these real-time crime centers through those DFR programs. The purpose of a drones as a first responder program is to get that drone on scene before you get a unit on scene. We're not replacing a first responder response in any capacity, and this won't work for rural areas across the county. But what we're seeing in urban areas is basically drones deployed in docks from rooftops, and from that real-time crime center, they're flying that drone remotely. So I'm going to switch over real quick. We're going to pray that technology is in our favor today. But in these drones as a first responder type of situation, imagine a call for service comes in. This is at a demonstration facility in Fenton that we have access to utilize today. But there's a dock drone sitting out on a platform. Call for service comes in, and that person from that real-time crime center can enter that address in or click a point on the map, select the drone that they want to launch, and within about 20 seconds, that drone will be launched in the air, heading to that call for service. Now, we're never going to replace a first responder or a police unit going to that scene, but how can we provide them more intelligence as they're heading to that location? Using a drone like this in this situation, looks like we have, hopefully the network's not blocking. I'm going to land it and try one more time, see if we can get the drone video up for you. But in this situation, essentially, you're sending that drone to the scene to gather information for those responding units. Now, absolutely, there's some calls for service that could be an area check or other types of things that we might be able to clear with a drone without dispatching a unit. Right now, staffing is such a tough thing to fill in the law enforcement sector, and so using a drone technology can be a force multiplier for these types of staffing situations. The drone's going to come back again and land. We'll let it close back up real quick, and I will try to launch it one more time. Now, the platform we're using right now, we'll speak to the next slide when we get back to the presentation, but cybersecurity is obviously a big part of these discussions. And so many of these agencies are using equipment that's manufactured outside of the country, but we're using software like DroneSense, is what we're logged into right now, to fly that drone with US-based software. So that drone is physically migrated into the DroneSense ecosystem. This software is made in Austin, Texas, and then that maintains our cybersecurity concerns from that aspect. So as you see that drone take off, it's going to come up to a certain altitude. I did not fully test the network here on this computer, so I apologize if we're a little laggy.
That's not your fault, it's ours.
So we are headed now to that scene that we just developed to provide that intel. As that officer is flying the drone to go that location, they can control the camera, they can switch over to a zoom mode and zoom in. And then be gathering that intel to pass back to those first responders. This software can also send out a text message to or go ahead.
One quick question. So this is, you just set the land spot, and it's going to go hover over the spot so there's no one flying it right now. It's just
No
a
one
preset
flying.
coordinate.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pilot can take control back of that at any time during the operation, but this is meant to just get that drone into the area first in a very quick fashion. Oftentimes, we have very rough information when a 911 call comes in. When the dispatcher is going through getting all that information, they're looking for location, and that's the most important thing. And then as more information comes in, we funnel them down to that location. Well, as soon as they have a rough location, you dispatch that drone to start sending it to that location, and then again, refine it back down after that. So I just sent it back to home. You'll see we'll come back and land in the dock. It's an interesting look coming from the top down, so I'll make sure you see that real quick before we switch back over. These types of dock drone programs aren't great for every jurisdiction. A rural agency, I live in Livingston County, a rural agency in Livingston County, we're never going to be able to deploy a dock like this in a quadcopter to respond to calls for service across the county. But in some of our cities, like the city of Brighton or other locations, more urban environments, the city of Detroit is looking at DFR operations, a part of the AAM project that's down there today. There's other more urban areas that this type of operation is going to be the way of the future in many of these drone operations. So you'll see we'll come back down and land in the dock. And we'll close and end out. So that leads us right into data security. Right now, if you look at legislation across the country proposing different types of solutions to our current problem of the volume of operators or equipment we have deployed, made by countries of concern, China, Russia, other places across the country. One common approach to regulation to ensure that our data is secure is to require cybersecurity standards to be utilized by software companies that are running on these drones. So these drones, made by DJI in this case, but our agencies in Michigan use a variety of different products. This drone specifically has the ability to put it in something called local data mode, LDM. And so when it's in local data mode, we can then put a US-based software on that drone, on that device, and basically block any potential communication to the outside world. Those software companies, as an association, we encourage our agencies to look at things like making sure that those software companies have cybersecurity standards that are compliant with NIST and many other standards that are very common in law enforcement. Cybersecurity in general for law enforcement is not a new topic for us. All of the data that we have from our body cameras and LPRs and CAD systems and computers all have to be CJIS compliant, all have to follow these high cybersecurity standards. So this drone should be looked at as just the next tool in that toolkit down that process of following those types of cybersecurity standards. It's just like our iPhone or Android phones that we all carry around that are manufactured in these same countries, in these very similar factories. We use US-based software to be that cybersecurity stopgap for this equipment. Just a little depiction up there on the right-hand side for how that software works in a hierarchy. Basically, the drone would talk remotely to the US-based cloud. Most of the times our government operators use an AWS secure web server or Microsoft Azure to connect that drone directly to a US-based server. And then there's secure portals and firewalls that are put in place to block any information from going outside of the country, outside of these operations. Right now, our US manufacturers are unfortunately 3 to 5 years behind the technology curve of where our other products that we're using right now are today. Setting cost aside, cost is still 3 to 5 times the cost, but we're 3 to 5 years behind the equipment that we're using today. And so until our U.S. manufacturers and our friendly countries bring that equipment up to a level playing field, we'll be doing a disservice to public safety by regulating out the use of some of this equipment today. And that's why we're strongly advocating for the evaluation of these different data security standards to be rolled out a part of the regulations across the state. So we'll switch away from just the technology itself used on the public safety side to the threat of drones by the nefarious user across the state. Right now, across the state, we do not have a ton of counter-drone technology which can detect these drones. We have zero technology that can actually mitigate the drones, and that's the FAA is still working on how they're going to enable us locally to do that. But right now, we'd have the ability to detect. Some agencies have the ability to detect. So a couple examples would be some of our stadiums. So the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, have robust detection systems around all of their properties. But right now, they're typically only catching the negligent drone operator. So somebody who isn't trying to do harm, but just wants that incredible shot of the big house on game day, or is just trying to basically get some imagery of their tailgate or something to that extent. The truly nefarious drone operators that wanted to do damage in one of those situations would have the ability to do so because we don't have the ability to A, mitigate, or B, really robustly take those drones out of the sky or take control of them. So right now, drone detection is something that agencies are working towards. As an association, we're working to pool some of those resources. We have some grants that we've solicited for that would allow us to purchase some of that drone detection technology and then distribute it throughout the regions for agencies to share throughout the state. Because quite frankly, the technology is very expensive and all agencies across the country across the state will never be able to afford their own equipment at this phase. But we're hoping to bring that detection technology under one roof to be able to do that in that capacity. Lastly, just a little bit about mitigation. Right now, state and local government cannot take those negligent or nefarious drone operations out of the sky on our own. We have to use the authority of 3 departments: Department of Energy, Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security. There's some talk from the executive order side as well as some legislation that on the federal level that could change that in the near future for stadium operations and some other things. But as it sits today, we don't have that mitigation of authority, unfortunately. Then when we get that authority someday, there's going to be robust training that's going to have to happen on when we can and can't take drones out of the sky. There's going to have to be huge procurement programs to actually support the purchase and procurement of that mitigation technology as well. And so as you all continue to navigate these topics, we would love to have you continue to help us advocate at those levels for that technology to be able to use here in the state, because right now there is a large threat for those type of drone operations here in Michigan. One big use case where the feds did come in and helped us with a large event was the 2024 NFL Draft. The CBP was the agency that was charged with the drone mitigation, a part of that. And it was very interesting to see them operate through that environment. Several drones were actually mitigated during the NFL Draft. None of them were nefarious operators. All of them were negligent, just flying in the temporary flight restricted area. But that technology does exist out there today federally. It's just how do we continue to advocate to bring it down to our state level, because we all know we have many events across the entire state each and every year that could succumb to a threat by one of these technologies. As we continue to move into this next generation, the association would love for you all to consider, how do we find ways to continue to build the entire manufacturing UAS, unmanned aircraft systems, or drone ecosystem here in the state of Michigan? We cannot wait for the day that comes that we have U.S. manufacturers that are on the same feature parity level as our adversaries at this point. Next is just finding ways to inspire innovation without regulatory market share capture. We look at some of the legislation across the country right now, and it stunts the growth of the innovation curve because we're forcing basically regulatory capture of making us take steps backwards right now with different aspects of the technology. And the last big ask is for us all to work together to continue to strengthen our counter-UAS capabilities, because we know both detection and mitigation is a huge gap right now here in the state of Michigan. Thank you all for your time today.
Well, we appreciate. I didn't have to ask you to speak up louder at all. No, very clear, concise. Appreciate your presentation. Appreciate your service as a. Now, did you work for local law enforcement or okay? All right. For the law enforcement side, we appreciate that, and certainly we have a lot of camaraderie on this board or this committee regarding our thankfulness for those that help us each and every day in the law enforcement world. I do have a couple questions before we go to questions. One of them is the counter UAS, or that's a big thing on our committee, a big thought or a big concern, I think, across the board. As far as you mentioned the FAA a number of times, and I guess maybe my questions kind of delve into your association. Obviously, you're dealing with law enforcement agencies mostly. Is that the members of your association then?
Yeah, mostly law enforcement, and then we do have fire a part of that too, but about 80% is law enforcement agencies. Okay. And is that when you were part of the starting of that association, right?
Yes,
2
years
or 3 years ago. Did you, to get the law enforcement agencies on board with an association, was that a heavy lift, or was that something, did you make the membership open originally to all law enforcement to become a member, or how did that come to play? The price of entry, our membership is we charge $30 a year for a member. And we include all of our events throughout the year for free for them to come to, with the exception of our winter conference. We first put the board together strategically across the state and then kind of backfilled from there. And we found in each of those regions there really was somebody that was kind of driving the ship anyways for drone technology. And so when they stepped a part of the board, it was just kind of a natural next step for them to be a part of a larger regional and statewide program. And so we've got a long ways to go. We've only been at it for 3 years, but overall we've got pretty good buy-in across the state from those agencies. Mm-hmm. And on the FAA, I may have written it down wrong, the FAA license recertifications, or maybe is that how you stated, or is it just recertifying on a local level to make them better equipped to stay within FAA guidelines? Yeah, so they still definitely have to go through all the FAA stuff, have to stay current, take a recurrent test and things on that front. But our flight proficiency course is that hands-on portion of keeping them current, to have a department be able to say that they went through an accredited standard of starting that program, so they don't have to have the burden of doing that in-house per se. Mm-hmm. And are there other organizations throughout the different states that do a similar thing as you do here in Michigan as well? The Law Enforcement Drone Association is a nationwide organization, and they've begun to start state chapters. They have 2 or 3 different state chapters. As they start down that process, There's also 6 other associations right now like ours across the country, and we've all banded together as well and are learning from each other along the way. So the drone industry is very young still. We're only 10 years in of really true adoption. 2016 is when the laws drastically changed for commercial operators, so we're 9 years into this new regulation that allows really it to grow. So it's very new on that standpoint. There's still a lot of growth to be had.
Yeah, I do remember when I was in Afghanistan in 14, I had one of my soldiers working for me that was working on his FAA license, and it was a brand new process, because before that it's still kind of the Wild West, but it really was the Wild West before the FAA started coming in with a lot of certifications and requirements and things of that nature. So yeah, he was quite an oddball, just as far as, because we knew drones, military drones, but not necessarily on the commercial side. So I appreciate your conversation and your presentation. Definitely your honesty and the critical things that we need to look at. And I'm certain some DGI will come up in some of the questions. I know that, so that'll be something that'll be coming, I'm sure. But as far as focusing from the Homeland Security aspect, how we can make our state more secure, I appreciate what you're doing with the association and also all the information that you gave us as well. We're going to start with some questions. Representative Menser. Vice Chair, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So before I got this gig up here in Lansing, I was the senior buyer for the county of Macomb. And as the senior buyer, I got to buy drones for the sheriff department. We got a boatload of federal money in, and we interviewed I don't know how many drone suppliers and companies, and saw presentations and they came with their drones and, walked us through the steps, and we flew them everywhere. We eventually picked 3 drones. They were approximately $30,000 a piece. But I can tell you, when they came in, it was like little kids at Christmas. The guys were so flipping excited. But they would not let me touch them. I hold that grudge to this day. But I can tell you specifically some of the things that the Macomb County Sheriff Department has used those drones for. They have used them to oversee traffic issues. Everybody's traffic on I-696 and the 96 and the I-75 and all the construction and the traffic jams. They have used those to help mitigate and open and change lanes. They used them in a hostage situation where somebody was in a household up with hostages. They also have used them, of course, on finding lost children and seniors. There was one incident in Mount Clemens where they were able to use their drone. We had a very disturbed individual up on the roof of a church with a gun who had actually fired shots. In all of those cases, those drones were instrumental in coming to a safe, effective conclusion. So I see that drones are going to be more and more important and useful in not just a policing situation, but in a fire department situation to check out what's going on the roof. And while we were sitting here, I want you to know, I texted the chief of the Mount Clemens Fire Department Union and asked him when he's getting drones and how we can help with that. So I just want to say thank you for doing this organization or association, and I'm going to say thank you on the behalf of the Macomb County Sheriff Department. They're awesome guys doing great work for the public benefit and the public good. Thank you.
You never asked a question.
How much fun are you having?
A lot of fun. I'm passionate about the subject, so absolutely.
Okay, good. I wanted to hear a question. No, we know you're very passionate, and one thing I'll probably bring up later is the 2023, the American Security Drone Act. That was a federal thing, but I think that'll come out. I'll ask that question here in a little bit regarding that. But Representative Vice Chair Meerman.
Thank you, Chair Brook. Just to jump right into it, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, banning them from Department of Defense property. I mean, how do we balance that with, the things and the sensitive things that they could see here in the state of Michigan? I mean, obviously they have decided they can't trust DJI.
So a couple different layers to that. We advocate for a multi-level approach to the data that we're collecting, that those drones are being deployed out on those scenes. If we look at critical infrastructure locations like DoD facilities, there is a potential risk that we need to evaluate in that process. And so if we look at that, though, from the side of public safety response, most of the scenes that a public safety responder is going to is all either FOIA-able data or publicly accessible data that we're just using this equipment to assist in that type of operation as another tool. And so as we look at those critical infrastructure facilities, absolutely we should have very strict standards for what we do fly and don't fly, just like cell phones can't be used or taken into some of those facilities because of the data that a cell phone somebody might capture on. Absolutely 100% agree with you that we need to be very sensitive to what that looks like on the drone that might not be manufactured in the U.S. A couple aspects to that. The first is that we currently treat all of our U.S. manufacturers, though, as a blanket, they're blanketed cyber secure, and we don't have any standards that still hold them accountable for those cybersecurity aspects. A great example is one of our U.S. manufacturers, Skydio, sent mailers out to governmental entities that had a LTE SIM card in it that recorded the experience of the police chief that opened that mailer in their office and sent back video data and other things back to Skydio, whether it was for marketing purpose, whatever that was. That also violates those types of cybersecurity standards. And so as we look at this kind of layered threat approach, those high-risk facilities, absolutely we need to have different standards for flying and conducting operations around there. But if you look across even the whole federal government, most of them have waivers to fly DJI and Autel products today because of the effectiveness of those pieces of equipment. And then we take a step further, and under NDA 2025, the federal government is tasked on conducting an audit of DJI, Autel, and Anzu Robotics. If those audits come back not clear, they'll be banned. Those three companies would be banned from the FCC or added to the FCC covered list in 2026. And so right now we've pushed that formal audit process. It's all been hearsay up to this point. Nothing has ever been formally released to the public about any of these behind-the-scenes investigations. But this time around, under NDA 2025, those investigations and audits are going to be conducted and going to be released on what the findings are by the federal government by the end of the year, or those agencies get added to the FCC covered list. And so on our side of the house, if the FCC comes back, or if the auditors come back and say there's an issue with one of these manufacturers, we will 100% be on the same side of agreeing with this team that says we should be not using that equipment here in the state. But until any of that data comes back by our federal government with a formal audit, it seems very premature to regulate any of that technology out at this point.
And unless it's over sensitive areas, you're saying?
Correct.
Then we should. What about, and I'm, the farthest thing from, being tech savvy, but some of what I'm reading is, the ability to shut these drones down. I mean, if we got into, an altercation with China, what would keep them from shutting these down when we need them most, for public safety?
So FTI Consulting and Booz Allen Hamilton have conducted multiple third-party studies in the last 5 years of several of these manufacturers and have continued to prove that there is no backdoor in this equipment when it's flown in local data mode and when it's flown with US-based software. I am not a heavy IT background, so I can't dive in or speak to a lot of what those audits have produced or haven't produced, but the findings we've reviewed would show that that is not an immediate threat. I would say take it a step further if we're worried about shutting down the use of the equipment. Right now, our U.S. equipment is still light years behind of where this equipment that we're using today is, and it's 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the cost. And so if one of those situations were to happen, you look at an ROI of a fire department who's buying this equipment to deploy over a fire scene in a rural Michigan area, they're probably going to be grounded and not be able to use technology at all because there's no replacement means or procurement means for them to afford the other stuff either. So to that direct question though about shutting it down, I don't believe that, based off the audits, the third-party audits, don't believe that that's possible right now. And then B would say we'd have to look at the perspective of what they would not be able to buy if that theoretical thing could happen in the future.
I mean, forgive me, Chair, but some of what the DOJ and these other agencies are warning about are the back doors. I mean, they must have found them themselves. You're saying audits that you're looking at haven't, but it's pretty clear they have some pretty major concerns. It will be interesting to see what happens with that, I guess, in 2026, this audit.
If the Secret Service had an issue with this and DOJ had an issue with this technology, they wouldn't have let the state of Michigan deploy them on VIP presidential visits all fall this last year. And so I think there's from a documented side of the cybersecurity, what they're seeing in place, the waivers that are getting issued for these federal agencies to still fly and utilize the equipment. Department of Interior is a great example of that. I believe that there's more to that story, and so I'm really excited to see what this audit happens with NDA 2025, because it finally brings to the table this fear-mongering that we've seen across the whole industry up to this point, and has something tangible which we all can agree to is agency conducted the audit, they're going to release the findings of that audit, and then we'll know what really comes to fruition through a lot of that information.
I hear what you're saying about them being used over presidential visits. But they're continuing to issue reports as well at the same time. It's the same agency, I guess. Do you work for Unmanned Vehicle Technologies?
I do.
Okay. I'll have more questions later if that's okay, Chair.
Absolutely. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, before we go to our next question, so there's a difference. Obviously, your take or your perspective is you're working for the emergency services, and technically, it doesn't matter if you get a Chinese fire extinguisher or an American-made fire extinguisher. You want to put the fire out. I mean, that's, I guess, really where it comes down on the real level. And you're working with your stakeholders and your association that they just want to fly drones to be able to save lives or to put out fires or to catch bad guys. And I am reminded of back in the first Gulf War when we had Iraqis surrendering to news crews, if you recall that. That was before my time. I joined in '92, but that story about the gentleman surrendering to a drone. I mean, sometimes when you don't know the unknown, you give up, and that's a good thing. On the vulnerability side versus maybe the abuse side, you're familiar with the 1260H list, where DGI it's not there because of possible backdoors or technological vulnerabilities, but because of their association with the Chinese military structure. And there's a number of 160 different companies, not just drone companies, on there. But that's another take. But if you were to be given a timeline, and I know we're not talking bills today per se, but as far as just to give us some feedback, like how long is a drone's capability good for? What's the lifespan of a drone? Maybe the hardware, I mean the actual casing of it, and then the hardware, and then the software. What is the lifespan of a drone?
We're finally getting to that point of technology that's a lot more robust than it has been, and that technology curve it's like the new iPhone. Look at the last 5 generations of iPhones. They're very similar in their capabilities, and we're finally getting to that point where things are leveling out a little bit, so the user isn't always needing to jump to that next product to get a bunch of more features. The things are stabilizing out a bit that way. So I would say the usable life is about 5 to 6 years on a piece of equipment as it sits today. You have organizations, though, like Flock Safety, who came into the conversation last week at the symposium and utilizes foreign-made equipment right now, and said that they're 5 to 10 years out before they will have a product that they can trust that's an NDA-compliant solution, and they're pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into manufacturing. And so it's humbling to see a manufacturer come to the table and say that publicly in that type of setting of, hey, we're 5 to 10 years out before we have a product that we know is going to be competitive and comparable to what you guys are using today.
Thank you. Representative Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. And Livingston County, I just have a question. Just because I'm thinking of my district, which has the chain of lakes, and we have so many problems kind of with having officers on the lake and, you know, people who have that capacity. What is the jurisdiction like? So if you were, like, a drone could certainly help with water safety and be overhead, because we know a lot of the boats are going too fast or creating too much wake, or not, as I learned at my Portage Lake Association meeting last week, you're supposed to go in a circular way with your boat. When you go from, like, Livingston to Washington County, how do they talk to each other? Are they allowed to go through different municipalities and counties?
So as it sits today, once an aircraft leaves the ground, it belongs to the FAA, and it's under FAA regulations. And so there's airspace and other things that can drive where you can and can't fly. There's public safety licenses versus commercial licenses that drive all of that. But from a jurisdictional side, there is nothing in place there. So all of those things fall back to all the memorandums of understanding that are already in place with an agency. So an agency that parallels another agency is going to typically have a mutual aid agreement between the two to be able to respond to those types of situations. And so in that case, most of it just falls back and governs, like, hey, we need another police officer out here. We need another fire truck out here. We need a drone team. It's the same type of process it would be to request that other resource like any other resources that they request today.
Thank you. Representative Shriver, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Because working for unmanned vehicle technologies, do you guys engage in any kind of lobbying or advocacy for to support continued access to these Chinese-made drones?
UVT has a large book of business outside of Chinese-made drones. We have over 50 manufacturers in our product catalog. We represent some made by Chinese drones. We also represent an abundance of U.S.-made NDA compliant solutions. So that goes across the board completely in that capacity. UVT does not hire a lobbyist for any of those efforts. We don't have anybody on our payroll from any of that capacity from the lobby standpoint, no.
So would you say the answer would be yes?
We don't hire lobbyists?
No. Do you engage in any type of lobbying or advocacy in support of continued use of these Chinese-made drones? It's yes or no.
We do not hire a lobbyist. We don't have anybody internally.
I'm not asking if you hire any lobbyists. I'm asking if you engage in any lobbying or advocacy activities.
No.
Okay.
We do not.
Do you, because like you said, you have a plethora of products, Chinese-made, American-made. Do you actively recommend or prioritize American-made drones to your clients?
So we've always, since the founding of UT, the CEO has always jokingly said, the proverbial trench coat, where walks in the door and is able to provide the best product in the best situation for the customer. So from that standpoint, whatever product that agency needs in that capacity for their constraints, whether it be cybersecurity constraints, operational constraints, those products get recommended based off of price and capabilities for that customer. And so that changes, across the board for those different types of customers. It's all driven by what they need at that point, not what is required by law or desired in the future might be regulated out or whatnot.
So it's safe to say it's more of like a global smorgasbord. America's just kind of one of the products. It's not necessarily prioritized or pushed. It's just one of them.
It's pushed when the capabilities are what the agency needs for that certain situation. Absolutely.
But not based on the origin of creation. It's just based on the function of the product.
Based on the function of the product, correct.
Okay. And would you support any policies that would prioritize American drone systems over Chinese alternatives for critical infrastructure and public safety use? And before you answer, I will say that comment that you made earlier about the American-made drone system putting chips of some sort in their mailers and using those mailers to survey or gather intelligence or whatever. That was very interesting. And so I will say it I don't want to get too off script here, but let's just say there's more people in this country that are concerned with the FBI knocking on their door than the CCP knocking on their door. And so the surveillance, it's an issue on both sides. But to get back to my question, would you support policies that would prioritize American-made drones?
Would support policies that find ways to lift our American-made drone market up to the same caliber of equipment that we're using right now? Absolutely. We have to, as a country, find ways to build the entire U.S. ecosystem. That's everything from chips to batteries to aircraft components. We have to build this all unilaterally, though. It's not just funding one little portion of it. So absolutely, we'd love to find ways to build this whole ecosystem. The federal government has not done that to this date. And so we look at even tariffs and other things. How do we funnel that type of funding back into our ecosystem to build it all up to support our U.S. companies? 100%. And our agencies cannot wait for the day to come that this equipment is feature comparable to what we're using right now across the country.
It's a big reindustrialization, big project, much needed. Happy to hear that you're on board. Thank you.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Shriver. Yeah, it does. I did have a note on here, the May 5th sanctions that China put on American-made drones because of an issue with Taiwan, and I know that's caused an issue with importing batteries, because my understanding is even a lot or most, I don't know if it's all, based drone manufacturers here still require batteries that are made in China, is kind of my understanding. So that's kind of put a little ding on even our American-made economy with the drones and that procurement of the whole system. We do have another question from Representative Meerman.
Thank you, Chair. How would protecting airspace, what would be the best way to go about that? You know, we could be dealing with drone swarms. You know, how would local law enforcement, let's say the president's here, what do we in Michigan here need to do to give them that integrity of airspace, ability to protect the integrity of the airspace?
So I am by no means a lawyer, and by no means know a ton
Technology.
about federal preemption and what that kind of how that all works out. And so, unfortunately, with where we sit today and what our legal teams have told us is that some of that federal preemption is concerning about what we can actually do today as it stands. And so I think that unfortunately has to be the first issue that works out.
Sure.
Today, if you came to me and said, Matt, we're bringing a big event to this area. We'd love to have some agencies to come out and fly at that event, and we also are really concerned about the drone threat. We'd encourage the agencies to reach out to our federal partners to see what technology they could bring out to help support those operations, because right now we can't procure and own that equipment as state and local government.
Let's leave aside the legal argument, you know, protecting airspace, like technology, from the technological side, like how would we stop a drone swarm? Is it with other drones? Are we taking over control of the machines themselves? You know,
there's a variety of different mitigation technologies out there, whether it be taking over the RF links, whether it be putting up different types of, not geozones, but different types of blocker situations that could basically disrupt RF interference or RF communications. The most interesting part about that, though, is I think there is a huge vulnerability, by the way, but the interesting part about the communication protocol is RF, so radio controller to drone is one way, but we start looking at other ways that people are flying drones now, and they're flying them over 5G LTE, and so we can't just blanket jam all 5G and LTE a part of that. In different combat types of situations, absolutely 100% that technology can be utilized. But here stateside, it's hard to deploy some of that technology because the frequencies that many of these commercially available drones are operating on are common Wi-Fi frequencies, cellular frequencies, and things to that nature. So I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. I hope that companies continue to explore that use of devices that can block those swarms, because that is absolutely going to be a threat in the future here.
some technology is around physically taking drones down with a net or another drone? I mean, is that could be part of the picture?
Absolutely. The state police about 5 years ago hosted a big counter UAS day. And one of the companies that showed up to that counter UAS day, it looked like a rocket launcher that shot a net out of a cannon. And the net was packed into a little tennis ball type device, and it shot it out and exploded and could take the drone from the sky in that capacity. The scope on it would lock in on it. You basically move the whole rocket launcher type of device that shot this net out. So there are 100% those types of situations. But if you look how fast these drones move, I don't know if those types of kinematics will always be a good answer. But if it's a slow-moving environment, absolutely something like that could work.
Thank you.
Oh, really good information. One of the goals of this committee is to scare the bejesus out of people, to wake us up, because this is across the nation, this is a threat. It's not just, the type of drones, it's drones, period, and the lack of restrictive airspace and the lack of enforcement ability on the part of our local and state law enforcement. Another question from Representative Mincer.
Thanks. I was just kind of looking at some of the numbers. I think I read that there's about 1 million recreational and commercial drones here in Michigan. How much do you feel that these recreational operators interfere with public safety drone use, and how can we combat that? I know that the FAA has laws about how much the drone weighs, where can it fly, how far up it can fly, so how can we combat that? And second, when we have a very sensitive facility like Selfridge Air National Guard Base in our backyard, how can we protect Selfridge and those billion-dollar planes that we're getting, the F-15EX Eagle IIs, how can we protect them from recreational operators who want to fly in our airspaces?
So I'd start with, if you talk to the FAA about the amount of compliance they get with commercial operators and public safety operators, it's probably near 100. Most people that are in the drone industry doing commercial operations or public safety operations are doing things the right way. So to that point, 100%. The issue is more so the either negligent or the people that are looking to do harm, not those that are conducting commercial operations and public safety operations. The FAA here in the state has been wonderful to work with for all of our agencies that are conducting these operations, because they know they're trying to do it the correct way. But right now, you could go to Best Buy and purchase a drone for a couple $100s and go out and deploy it. And there is some requirements that with the FAA you're supposed to go through an online safety trust course, but there's no education material that's provided by that company that's selling that equipment here to that person. So really, I think the biggest thing we can do to combat those negligent operations is 100% to enforce education at the level of the procurement side. So when somebody buys that equipment, they have to at least sign off or be given some information to know what they have to do to legally comply with the laws that are on the books today. There's no technology out there that we could just surround Selfridge with right now and that would eliminate anything from flying in the sky, because there's so many different technologies out there. And so if we're looking at the negligent operations, definitely education, I think, is the biggest point that we can continue to drive as a group forward on that front.
So you think that would look like something like you go to buy a drone and the seller or the retailer is required to give you a form that you fill out then and there that gets turned into the FAA before you can take that drone home?
I don't know what that all could look like, and that's not my world, but living in that education component of finding ways to educate that operator, that's one example that has potential that could work, but just finding continual ways to educate them on that ground floor during the purchase, I think, is really important.
Yeah, when you buy a firearm, you fill out forms before you can take that firearm home, no matter what it is. So it seems to me that would be an easy, an easy way to go about it.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
Thank you, Representative Menser. I knew she had worked Selfridge in there somewhere, so we want her to.
Yes, Jess.
You bring some good points on that, the purchasing, and certainly there's a difference between your commercial flyers, your professional flyers, and those that are just hobbyists or recreational flyers that seem to be, I don't want to say a loophole per se, but I guess there is a loophole on who is flying those drones. I had a question, I wrote it down. As far as you mentioned the geo fencing or geo walls around critical infrastructure. Currently, I know DJI removed. There's a hardware update. They removed geo fencing from their capability. Do other drone manufacturers have that in there? Is that something that can be placed in aftermarket, or do most drones come with that already installed?
So now that they've removed them, there are 0 manufacturers that have geofences across from that standpoint. You can create, like a customer can create geofences in some different drones of their own, but from a manufacturer-enforced geofences, there are, to my knowledge, no manufacturers that have that to date. And there's no way to kind of overlay level of from the outside, overlay those on that. It would have to be through that manufacturer's software to be able to enforce any of that for any of this piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm. And when you're flying a drone, just because I've never flown one, do you see the geofences? Because I know there's one building here in Lansing that has a geofence. Is that identified as you're flying? Like, how does the FAA make operators aware of those zones?
The FAA and their laws about where you can and can't fly, most manufacturers don't display that information on the drone itself. The operator is required to research that airspace before they go and understand basically where they're flying, how they're flying. Most of the manufacturers, I haven't seen any that from the controller itself you get any of those alerts. Now, like that software we saw on the screen there is some ability to pop up some of those warning areas and things when you're bringing ArcGIS layers and other things in from the FAA. But the controllers are basically, smartphones at this point, and so they don't have the ability to data kind of consolidate all of that in one place, I don't believe. So at this point, a lot of that data is required for the pilot to go and research and then carry it down. The manufacturers don't carry that burden of displaying a lot of that data.
Could be problematic. Yeah, definitely. Well, we appreciate your presentation. Certainly, you bring out a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm very, very inquisitive, so I apologize for all the questions to my committee members. But it definitely arises a lot of interest in me regarding, the security of where we sit and how these things work and just the technology in and of itself. And certainly a war zone is definitely different than here in America. I recall rolling through towns when we had our jammers on, because obviously IEDs were the biggest threat and cell phones and things. But I mean, we jammed everything outside of what we used. And yeah, we got a lot of bad looks from people on their cell phones that were mad that they lost their calls when we came through. Last comment, maybe last question. With the war in Ukraine and all the technology we've seen, especially last year there with the use of drones, do you think that how do you think that's going to change? Do you think that's going to have an effect or change on legislation or the awareness here in our state and in our nation? Kind of give your opinion of what's going on there and possibilities of how we can protect ourselves here from something like that.
Absolutely. I think it's already shaped our counter-UAS companies' approaches to how they are rolling out new technologies and things, if you look at what people are doing across the country. So I think tactics and things that we've learned from the war in Ukraine on the drone use side and counter drone side are going to be very important. They're going to carry on in many of our many of our groups moving forward. Until we have something happen here across the country, I don't believe that there'll be a massive incentive for these mitigation technology and other things. There's been a lot of efforts by law enforcement agencies across the country for the last 10 years to force the federal government to allow us to utilize some of these tools, and not a ton of movement has happened to date. And so until we see something that happens locally, my personal thought is there isn't going to be a ton of movement on the federal level on that front. But really hope that day comes, really hope that we have that ability at some point, because there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from our wartime situations, especially in Ukraine in the last few years.
Certainly, certainly. And I got to meet with two congressmen, Congressman Barrett yesterday, and then the other last week I got to meet with Congresswoman Capter from Ohio. So I'm down to 433 left to talk to on the federal level. But we have one last question. That'd be, I apologize, committee, but Representative Meerman.
Thank you, Chair Brooke, for the, I just wanted to sort of get it out there publicly on this forum that, you know, there's a Detroit news story of a drone attack thwarted against Detroit Arsenal TACCOM. It just came out today. So, I mean, this is really pertinent stuff that, you know, you're engaging in, Chair. And, I mean, it sounds like the drone was in the air, so.
Oh, thank you. I guess you don't have to comment on that. You probably don't know about that if it just came out.
I do not. I look forward to researching that later today, absolutely.
It's a very timely issue. We appreciate your presentation. We appreciate your service that you're giving, you know, and helping essentially save lives around the state through the association and helping awareness as well as the proficiency of our law enforcement and fire enforcement, and appreciate your presentation today, sir.
Thank you,
Look forward
Chairman.
to keeping the conversation rolling. Thank you, Matt. All righty. Well, seeing there's no members to be excused and we have no further business before the Committee on Homeland Security and Foreign Influence will stand adjourned.